The Mecklenburg County election debates are a service of WTVI, Mecklenburg County, and the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. The views and opinions expressed in these debates are those of the candidates and do not necessarily represent the views of WTVI, its management, Mecklenburg County, or the League of Women Voters.
PBS Charlotte and the League of Women Voters present Election Debate 2016.
Hi, I'm Danielle Koster with PBS Charlotte. Welcome to the 2016 General Election Debate, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. During the next 27 minutes, you'll hear from the 4 candidates in the Mecklenburg County Board of Commissioners at-large race. Now, for this race, voters may choose 3 candidates. Questions for today's debate were provided by the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. The candidates were not given the questions in advance. I'll call on the candidates in random order, and they'll each have 30 seconds or 1 minute to respond. Now, if any of you would like to challenge your opponent, raise your yellow challenge card. You'll have 30 seconds to respond. Each candidate has 3 challenges during this debate, and you'll be allowed to make a 30-second closing statement. Now, let's meet the 4 candidates in the Mecklenburg County Board of Commissioners at-large race. They are Jeremy Brasch, Pat Cotham, Trevor Fuller, and Ella Scarborough. We'll get started with the first question. Now, for this question, you'll each have 30 seconds to respond. The question is, on September 27th, 6 members of the County Commission passed a resolution in response to the recent protest in Charlotte. The resolution says that change is required in systems and structures. Name one change you will act on and how. We'll start with you, Mr. Brasch.
So I wasn't there, obviously, for that vote or that policy that was implemented or voted on. But I would say one change for the system that I would implement if I had the power to implement it would be better communication from our sheriff department at the county level, and I would advocate for better communication from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. I think communication would go a long ways to improving the environment.
Thank you. Ms. Cotham.
Oh, thank you. That question encompasses a lot of information. Certainly, we want changes in structure in our community where we have more housing for people who are struggling, people who are hourly workers. We talk about affordable housing, but there's a lot of people who fall into a category where they can't even afford that. So that kind of structure, certainly we need to have listen more to our community, and the levels of government need to work better.
Thank you. Mr. Fuller, your response.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us here at this debate, and it's an important question you ask. You know, what I think a lot of people who were protesting out on the streets of our city were protesting about was that they didn't have access to the economic opportunity that some of us in the community enjoy. And so I think one of the things we need to do is focus on one of the key drivers of prosperity, and that is education. So that's why I've proposed, and we are moving toward universal pre-K in Mecklenburg County. That's one of the most important things that we can do so every child can have a quality early childhood education.
And Ms. Scarborough, your response.
Thank you so much for the question. It is important that we put a lot of money in training. And as we train and also provide for our citizens the new jobs before they come to Mecklenburg County. So training is a major factor. We also must ensure that once our citizens are trained, that there are jobs there, and sometimes they're not. We train a lot, and then there are no jobs. So we must provide them, and we're doing, I think, a good job with that so far.
Thank you. The next question, how can you expedite the work of the county's Economic Opportunity Task Force to produce findings and recommendations to address the lack of economic opportunity and mobility for the county's poorest residents? You'll each have 30 seconds, and we'll start with you, Ms. Cotham.
Well, that task force is working, independently, and so we haven't really had as many updates that I think we would all like, but their work is very tedious and they're doing, a really good job. So I think the more we speak out publicly about this issue, they're listening to the whole community, and I think we need to let them do their job, and they are doing it, and I look forward to hearing the results.
Thank you. And your response, Mr. Fuller.
Thank you. So the Economic Opportunity Task Force was created because I had called for it to be created because Charlotte was rated 50 out of 50 of communities throughout the country when it came to lack of economic mobility. The task force is doing some really important work to find out why we are 50 out of 50, but more important, what are the evidence-based solutions that will work that we can implement at the county level, at the city level, at the school board level. So we've given them time because these are tough issues. I expect that they will be producing their report, and I would encourage them to do so with some urgency.
Thank you. Ms. Scarborough.
I'm excited about the task force. However, I've been here before. One of my statements is we've been this way before. We've had task force before. We've had jobs and job training. The issue is we need to deal with why citizens are not getting jobs and why they are not being put in homes and being able to purchase homes rather. And I want to say it, but I see some issues there, and we need to deal with them and not play with them.
Thank you. Mr. Brasch, your response.
I'm very concerned about the lack of mobility, and I would leverage the community to help explore that. I understand that UNC Charlotte has an urban development program that they've been getting up off the ground for the last maybe 10 years or so. I would like to leverage that and see if people in the community can help. I wonder how much the task force costs, and so I hope we get a good value out of it, but I would like to leverage the community. I know that at UNC Charlotte they have economic policy PhDs. I'd like to hear what they have to say, and the Urban Institute.
The next question, with demographers predicting population shifts from rural to urban America, what part do you see the Mecklenburg County government playing in the development of a plan to create more affordable housing opportunities for those ranking under 60% of the area median income in our county? You'll each have 30 seconds to respond, and we'll start with you, Mr. Fuller.
All right, thank you. Well, it's a difficult question. Generally speaking, the city of Charlotte and cities throughout our counties are mostly charged with making sure we have affordable housing. Our job at the county level is to provide supportive services for people so that they can remain in their housing. But I think it's an issue that we've got to address as a region, and I think Mecklenburg County can serve as a catalyst for all the counties around us so that we can have real solutions that work. Yes, we need to spend money, but we also need to deal with the fact that people often say they don't want, quote, affordable housing in their neighborhood, and that's a challenge that we must address throughout this county.
Your response, Ms. Scarborough.
A couple of weeks ago, we were told that there were some new apartments coming, and we see them all across the city. You see a lot of apartments. One of the things I've been asking is, why can't we say, no matter what the cost is, that 10% of our people who do not have jobs, who do not have housing, can be put there? That will trigger, I think, quicker than anything else if they were allowed to be in housing across the city, no matter what their economic the economic status is. And what we would do is help them. And if I live next door to someone who needs help, I'll help them quicker because I know them. And so I hope we would do something like that.
Mr. Brasch, your response?
Yes, I think what would help the most is economic development. So if we spur the economic development of all of Mecklenburg County, including the areas hardest hit, that by spurring that economic development with probably a comprehensive taxing strategy that incentivized that economic development, that everybody would be raised up at the same time. And I think unity ultimately is what we're seeking as a county, and I think that unity would be best served by raising everybody up.
Thank you, Ms. Cotham.
Again, this is a more of a city issue than ours, but I think that we need to be bold, and I think we need to try something big. And I have talked about what if since the economy is better, what if we didn't use our economic development money on bringing new businesses here from other states, and instead use that money to help incentivize developers to with some kind of tax benefits or something, and help them to be motivated, because right now they have more opportunity to build more expensive apartments. But I think we need to take a bold step.
For this next question, you'll each have 30 seconds to respond. The question is, how can the business community and Mecklenburg County work together to increase economic mobility? And we will start with Ms. Scarborough.
Thank you so much for the question. Economic development and providing more jobs is actually, it's not rocket science. It's when we train the people, have the jobs there, and if they're not trained, we train them to ensure that the jobs are there. So I think it is imperative that we stop talking and doing.
And your response, Mr. Brasch?
Yes, I think the best way to provide economic mobility is through education. The better educated our citizens are, the more adept they are at moving from one job to the next job. Experience is very important, but we should focus on education, providing educational opportunities.
Ms. Cotham?
I have worked in the past with businesses trying to encourage them to hire people who have a criminal record, and many of them are in this population. And I really, small companies do hire people, but our larger companies don't. And I would try to work more to try to get people jobs. And I think if so many of our citizens don't even have a chance, they're immediately put to the back of the line because of a mistake they made years ago.
And Mr. Fuller.
Thank you. I think what we've got to do is we've got to join with our business partners, and we need to make bold steps. That means we need to stop concentrating all of our wealth in certain areas of our county and start putting resources in other areas of our county. We know what the places are, the east-west axis across Mecklenburg County, where we have so much economic challenge. That's where we need to be encouraging development. So let's stop putting all of our eggs in the same baskets all the time, and let's put them in areas where they can actually help folks who need it.
And the next question, you'll each have 30 seconds to respond. The question is, there are many instances of the legislature imposing its will regarding policies previously left to cities and counties. Are they hindering economic development in Mecklenburg County? Mr. Brasch?
By and large, legislation definitely hinders economic development, except in the case where you need legislation to build a market or something like that. But by and large, legislation creates barriers and there are winners for those barriers and there are losers for those barriers, but it creates that barrier. And so legislation should be done sparsely, and if we're being over legislated in Mecklenburg County in specific instances, we need to raise our voice to the state.
Ms. Cotham?
Oh, thank you. I think it's well documented that HB2 has devastated our area and made us a laughingstock nationwide. So I do think it's happening. It's true, and I think that the state needs to focus on what's good for the state and let the cities, and especially the major cities, we know more about what's happening in our area. And I wish that we had a better relationship with them, and they would, help us to we don't need government to be an obstacle to business.
Oh yes, go ahead and challenge Mr. Brasch.
I would challenge that. I would say that the obstacle started at the city council when they tried to legislate a constitutional issue, which the Supreme Court is designed to handle. And I think that started that obstacle.
Can I respond?
If you respond, you'll use a challenge.
Okay. I would just say that all of the candidates on the city council, they campaigned on those issues. They were elected by the people in the city of Charlotte, and so it really was no surprise.
Getting back to the question, I'll repeat it. Yes. There are many instances of the legislature imposing its will regarding policies previously left to cities and counties. Are they hindering economic development in Mecklenburg County? Mr. Fuller.
The short answer is yes, unequivocally so. And we need to have a state legislature that's more interested in prosperity across the state. And the fact of the matter is that there is a leadership in Raleigh that simply have shown themselves to be unfit to govern the state because they seem so preoccupied with social issues and pursuing an ideological agenda, when what we really need is we need to concentrate on economic development for our entire state. And that means that we need to encourage it in our large counties like Mecklenburg County and like Wake County. That's where we need to be.
And Ms. Scarborough.
I think that the state legislators evidently have not lived in Mecklenburg County. And I say that because I believe that from the economic perspective, if they would just look at what we are doing, they would make a better choice, and they would also sit down with us and talk about what works and what doesn't work. We have not had that kind of conversation, and we do need to sit around the table to talk about it.
The next question, you'll each have 30 seconds for your response. The question is, the state legislature continues to cut state per pupil funding for education. What obligation does the county have to make up the shortfall, and why? We'll start with you, Ms. Cotham.
Well, we have been doing it. I think we're certainly on record for how much we give to the schools, and we supplement the teachers' salaries. And so we do step up, just like we also step up. The state also hasn't not done their job with the court system and with the public defenders and district attorney. And so we are also supplementing their salaries. So the state, they claim a lot of success, but really they're just passing the burden on to us.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Fuller.
I absolutely agree with that. Too many things are getting passed down to the county. The state has cut education funding at a tremendous level. And so these are our students, these are our children, this is our community. And so we are in a position where we have to step up. We have no other choice. But it's the wrong way to go, and we've got to rethink how we fund education in this state. We cannot continue to increase the burden on county property tax dollars to cover state responsibilities to fund education. And if the state can't do it properly, then we need to figure out how to change this system.
Ms. Scarborough.
There is a statement that goes around, and we hear it all the time, the great state of Mecklenburg. And I think there are some people who believe that. We may be economically better off in some of our cities and our counties. However, our tax dollars go back into the system to also help those other counties. So therefore, we must take it serious, sit at the table, and I think we've done enough talking. We have given, as my colleagues just said, we've given, but now we need to sit down and make it happen.
And Mr. Brasch.
Yes, I think that North Carolina's doing a terrible job funding our school system. I hear that we're like 40th or something out of 50 in the states as far as funding our school system, and that's just terrible. I think that we are also one of the wealthier counties in Mecklenburg County, and that it is our job and our responsibility to fund our schools as much as we can, and it should be one of our top priorities. And we should continue to challenge the state and the poor job they're doing here.
This next question, in one sentence, what did you do to warrant the pay raise approved by commissioners for themselves? We'll start with you, Mr. Fuller.
Well, first of all, it really wasn't a pay raise. So the one thing I would say is let's check the record. Let's make sure we see what it is that we're talking about. Nobody likes to have folks misstate what is actually happening.
Ms. Scarborough.
Ditto.
Go ahead.
I would like to challenge Mr. Fuller.
Go ahead.
If you don't define it as a pay raise, how do you define it? They increased your compensation, and you voted for an increase in compensation when we need to give more money to our schools, which we just talked about. How do you justify that, no matter what you call it?
Right. Well,
we'll be using a challenge for your response.
All right. Well, I'd appreciate if you actually look at the facts, because the facts are that our compensation increased essentially the same amount as other county employees. What was done was to recategorize portions of our compensation. So if you look at the facts, you would conclude, as anyone who does look at the facts would conclude, that we received a raise that's similar to other county employees.
Ms. Cotham?
Yeah, that's really true, and that's why I voted for it. And because what we did is we are more in line with the City Council and with other county governments, where our expense money is we get our expense money as opposed to having to ask for it separately. And I mean, many of us have not claimed, I mean, I personally had not claimed any expense money since I've been on the board, except for one, when I was brand new, for one hotel night in Raleigh for some training. But we bear a lot of expense ourselves, so now we're getting it.
And the next question, you'll each have 30 seconds to respond. Given the state's refusal to expand Medicaid several years ago, how does that affect the county's cost for indigent care? And we'll begin with Ms. Scarborough.
What it does, it puts a burden on our folk trying to scramble and find the money to do the things we do. We have been very fortunate in meeting a lot of those goals. However, it would be good if the state would not sit on that money, and the citizens need to hold them accountable. That's where the problem is. The citizens don't know the difference, therefore they take advantage of the fact that they're not doing their job.
Mr. Brasch.
Yes, it definitely puts a burden on the county. We have a duty to help out with the funding of this situation. But again, I think we need to raise our voice to the state and challenge them.
And Ms. Cotham.
North Carolina tax dollars every year have gone to other states, even other states that have Republican governors who have taken these dollars. So this also hurts our economy. And we certainly have had, I went to a good friend of mine. It was a low-income woman. Her name was Evelyn, and she died because she was one of those persons who probably would have qualified, but she didn't have the money to get to, she was cutting her medicine in half. So not only are people dying, but it's hurting our economy and hurting our state.
And Mr. Fuller.
Well, this is another example of where our state legislature has shown themselves to be unfit to lead our state, because for ideological reasons, we have not expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. And so what that means in Mecklenburg County is that 50,000 people are not receiving adequate health care because they don't qualify because we have not expanded Medicaid. And what that means is that our emergency rooms are used more frequently. That means that when people come to our public health department needing assistance, all because of an ideological reason. We've got to change this.
For this next question, we ask that you simply answer with a yes or no. The question is it time to consolidate the city and county government for better use of resources and for planning? Mr. Brasch.
No.
Ms. Cotham.
No.
Mr. Fuller.
No.
And Ms. Scarborough.
Absolutely not.
All right, we will move on to closing statements. You will each have 30 seconds to make your closing statement, and we'll start with you, Mr. Brasch.
Thank you for having me. This has been my first debate. I've enjoyed it. I've been very nervous. I'm a moderate Republican, and so I'm an independent thinker, and I believe in doing what's right, not just because you believe it's right or your party believes it's right. My platform is policy before politics, and I ask that if you're a moderate Republican to vote for me, if you're an independent to vote for me, if you're a moderate Democrat, vote for me.
Ms. Cotham.
On the county commission, I am often the one that asks the very tough questions. I look out for people and I get deep into issues. And I am not afraid. I am fearless. And I am not afraid to ask very difficult questions. And I think we need that. And I have a strong business experience, so I bring a different aspect to the board. And I ask to be one of your 3 choices this November. Thank you.
Mr. Fuller.
Thank you. And thank you again to WTVI and to the League of Women Voters for having this debate. So I'm Trevor Fuller, and I'm running for re-election as a county commissioner. I believe that we are making progress in making sure that economic prosperity gets shared across our county. That's so important because it means that when prosperity is shared, we all benefit from that, whether it's universal pre-K, whether it's our jobs initiative, or whether it's just making sure that people are healthy in Mecklenburg County. So I ask for your vote once again on November 8th. Vote in early voting as well, starting October 20th. Thank you so much.
Ms. Scarborough.
I look forward to continuing to work with the citizens of Mecklenburg County, and also working on economic development, as all of us have said. That's the most important thing we can do. And also training our children while they are young. And when they are old, they will understand and they will produce for us. But they can't produce if we don't put money there to help them. I ask that you continue my legacy as being a county commissioner and working hard for the people. Those, I see people who don't even know what the county, they will ask you, what do you do? And I'm looking forward to continuing telling them, we help you and we are here to always be the voice for you.
Once again, thanks to Jeremy Brasch, Patricia Cotham, Trevor Fuller, and Ellis Scarborough, who are running in the Mecklenburg County Board of Commissioners at Large race. Again, for this race, voters may choose 3 candidates. For more information about the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg, visit goleaguego.org. And for more information about the candidates, visit vote411.org. A quick reminder for Mecklenburg County voters, early voting begins Thursday, October 20th. The general election is Tuesday, November 8th. Polls will be open from 6:30 in the morning until 7:30 in the evening. I'm Danielle Koser. Thanks for watching PBS Charlotte.